So we're learning about STLC, and I believe we have completed every step of STLC, every phases basically, from analysis of the requirement to creating the reports and participating in different meetings. So now, as part of STLC, we're going to learn about different type of testing. Yeah, this is what we're going to learn. And last week we briefly went over this. So in terms of testing, it's just not one type of testing that we perform. It is various type of testing. And if you look at the different type of testing, we have mainly there are two type of testing in software testing lifecycle, black box testing and white box testing. Black box testing is done by QA, quality assurance. That's the first one is our job. We perform black box testing. And the second one, white box testing, this is done by the developers. So we're going to learn about these two types of testing. And these are different types of black box testing, starting with system testing, smoke, sanity, ad hoc, end-to-end, functional, regression, backend, load stress, performance, alpha, beta, UAT, shakeout, security, usability, compatibility, rehost, GUI, monkey pilot recovery. All of these are black box testing. And if we look at white box testing, we only have two types of white box testing, unit and integration. That's it. These are two types of testing that is done by developers, and they perform this testing before they hand over the code or the software or the application to us, to QA. So what happens is, if you remember the STLC diagram, we have a development phase and then we have system testing phase or QA phase. So in development phase, what they do, developers, they build that application or they code that application. They do physical coding of that application. And once that is done, before they hand it over to QA, they perform these two types of testing internally to make sure that that application is good, is stable, and it is working good, basically. So, and this two type of testing is performed on the code level. It's not on UI. And what I mean by UI, it's not on physical front-end application. This is done on back-end where the code is stored. So unit is done, unit is basically they perform testing on a specific portion of code. And integration is done on also code level to make sure that one part of application is communicating with another part of application. So these are the two types of testing usually done by the developers. And once that is done, they will send the application to us and we'll perform our testing. So we're going to learn about those today. So let me move to this Excel sheet. So I've created this Excel sheet, if you can see it, and I will zoom in a little bit more so that it's visible to you. Okay. So if you can see my screen, you can see this this Excel sheet has everything basically about different types of testing. And this column B has same thing, all type of testing listed here. The ones that I was showing you on the word. So the ones are highlighted in red. These are not important one that no one would really ask you about this testing, but just know the name. I never perform this testing. I don't really know if anyone is performing this testing, but just know the name just in case. That's about it. The ones highlighted in yellow, obviously, these are unit and integration done by developers. Rest of them are pretty much done by us. Okay, so like I mentioned before, we perform. Like I mentioned before, there are two types of testing, category-wise, two different type of testings performed on the application: black box and white box. And we are responsible for black box. So I have separated all of the different type of testing under black box. If you look at this: functional, smoke, sanity, ad hocs, GUI stands for graphical user interface testing, end-to-end back-end regression. Regression is something you're going to hear about it a lot, and this is performed very frequently. And then everything else pretty much here. Okay, so unit and integration is not part of black box, so I have to delete this. What else? White box, black box. This is not part of this. Okay, what else? Okay, so this is good. Now let's learn more about black box testing, right? This is our responsibility, and we don't really need to know about white box testing. We just need to know that developers are performing this testing. That's all. We don't need to know anything else. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the black box testing. So under black box testing, if you look at this, this side, under black box testing, we have system testing. And what is a system? System is the very first day we talked about system application and whatnot, right? So system, under black box, what do? We perform testing on the entire system, and system is nothing but the entire application, right? And our job is ensuring that that system is working fine. The entire functionality of the system is working fine. So again, the system is nothing but the application, the entire application. If you take example of Facebook or any other application that you know and you use, is nothing but a system. If you talk about Google, Yahoo, Facebook, Twitter, anything else, any bank application, any type of application is nothing but a system. We call it system as a whole. So as a tester, our job is to ensure that that application or that system is working fine. And how do we ensure that? We perform various type of testing to ensure that that is working fine. So under black box testing, we have two different category of testing: functional testing and non-functional testing. Non-functional testing is also known as performance testing. And performance testing is to ensure that that application is performance-wise is working fine, meaning it has the speed, it has the load capability. So speed is nothing but like how fast that application is loading when you're in that application. So when you, let's say when you hit www.facebook.com, that facebook.com or www.youtube.com or any other application that you know of or you use, how fast that application opens or responds. So that is the speed of it, the load of it, right? Now, with one user, how much time it takes to load versus 100 or thousands or more, right? So every web-based application, you guys hopefully remember we talked about web-based application, um, desktop application, client-server application at the beginning of this course. Now, the web-based application is the most popular one here and everybody uses it. And we talked about the issue with web-based application, right? Is the load issue, is the performance issue. Now, every application has a limit in terms of how many users it will be able to support. So when they're creating those applications, they have those limits, and those comes from the client, the customers, the owner. So let's say you want to build an application and you are the client, you would let your developers know, hey, I want to create an application that should be able to support this many users at once, right? So this is the load of it, right? Now, if you think about Facebook, right, how many thousands, how many millions of active users it may have at a given time? It could be anything. We don't know, like you and I probably don't know, but of course is being captured by the owner of Facebook, the company of Facebook. Meta is definitely, they know, right? They know how many users it gets hit every on a given time, basically. What is the maximum? What is the minimum? Things like this. So when you're accessing Facebook from Bangladesh or US or UK, everybody should have access to it and also at the same time. So that also needs to be defined. So based on your business, that needs to be defined, and we will perform testing on those. And how do we perform this testing? So let's say you're creating you're creating an application that should support 1 million users. How do you test it? Like, do you have 1 million testers? No, of course not. So there are tools or applications, or there are methods that can send virtual users to do the same thing. It would simulate user action in that application to ensure that this application supports those million or whatever your capacity should be, and it will test it for you. So there are different applications or tools in the industry for testing purpose to basically mimic user action. So you can send like hundreds or thousands or a million, depending on your need, you can send that many users to the application to do the testing. So that's how we know the load of it, how much load it can handle. Stress testing is pretty much like, to find out the breaking point, like where does that application breaks? Is it 1 or 100 or 1,000 or whatever the number is? We will continue to add more users until that application breaks. So we test that. But you and I, we're not really going to perform this testing. There are specialists who performs performance testing. Usually we are focused on functional testing. Functional testing is pretty much 99% of the industry and 99% of the testers. Very rarely you need a specialist for performance testing. Usually they have, like, maybe a company usually has only one performance tester, and they may have like 50, 60 functional tester, things like this. Most of the companies nowadays, they don't even have performance tester. They really don't care, because when they build that application, it supports certain number of users, and also the need of the number of users is not very high, unless if you are if you're like a big application like Facebook and Twitter and then other things, and those type of application doesn't get built every day, right? We usually deal with Smaller application when it comes to number of user that applications should support. Now, daily basis, what the things you will be dealing with is the functional testing, which is this. So let's talk a little bit about functional testing. So when it comes to functional testing, you'll be performing smoke, regression, ad hoc, end-to-end sanity, backend security, usability, compatibility. Yeah, these are the ones that you would be performing when you get a job. And that's what we need to learn. So smoke testing, this is very first testing. If they ask you in the interview, what is the very first testing you perform in any application, that's the smoke testing. I can give you an example of it. So if we go to skillandtech.com, so this is our application, one of our application, right? We also have IT solutions as well. I think you guys know about that. So this is also another one of our application. Now, what is smoke testing? Smoke testing is to make sure that your main functionality of your application is working fine, also known as build validation testing. And if you guys are familiar with build is nothing but package code. So your developers will send you a build. So build is nothing but an application, right? Build is nothing but a package code that is sent to you. So if your developers, when you're in a project, the chances are they will not complete the entire application at once. They will complete part of it, right? Let's say when you're working on a project, they may just build like home functionality, just this page, maybe not even this page entirely, part of this page, and they will send this to you and say, hey, we have completed this much work, please go ahead and test it. Now, what do you do? Before you start your actual testing, you're going to perform a smoke testing. And smoke testing is nothing but ensuring the major functionality is working fine. So what you would do, you would take that URL and then you would hit that URL and you'll make sure that that URL is loading with that application's homepage. If there is a login button, you are going to log in to make sure that you're able to log in. If there are other major functionality, you're going to just click through it a couple of times to make sure that is working fine. And once that is done, your smoke test is complete. Now you can go ahead and start your further testing. So that's a very important one, smoke testing. It's also known as build validation testing. And that is the very first testing you perform on that application, ensuring that application is working fine. Now what happens, right? Let's say the developer says, hey, we have built that application, go ahead and test it. Now you perform your smoke testing and that fails, then what happens? What do you do? Yeah, Afridi, you have a question?
Yes, but sorry. Is there anything known as build verification testing? Because you said build validation testing, right? This is also
Same
called.
thing, same
Oh,
thing.
okay. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So now what happens if smoke test fails? These are all interview questions, right? So let's say they said, go ahead and start testing. So you're gonna go ahead and perform your smoke testing. And if smoke testing fails, for example, you hit this URL and nothing loads, obviously that's failing your smoke test. So that's one scenario. The other scenario that you hit this URL and it's loading your homepage partially, or let's say this page has a login functionality like this, right? And you're not able to log in. Let's say you're not able to log in, you enter username and password, and it doesn't allow you to log in. Then what happens? Now it's failing your smoke testing, and you're going to go ahead and erase the blocker ticket, blocker bug, and say, hey, you're going to push back this build. You're going to push back that deployment and say, hey, this is failing. Please go ahead and fix it. This is failing smoke test, and I'm not able to perform further testing. Please go ahead and fix it. So this is very, very important to understand. right? Okay. So next one
Can
would
you repeat
be,
that? Can you repeat that one more time? So if it fails, you submit a ticket or you reach out to them? How exactly do you notify the developers?
um, ideally you should submit a ticket. So um, there will be communication channel that could be via Slack. Like if you look at this Slack, Slack is really popular now. And within this Slack, you could have like, different channel. In that channel, that would notify you, right? Hey, we have sent you this build, please go ahead and validate it. Now you're going to perform your smoke test. And once you perform your smoke test, if it fails, you're going to log a ticket. Now, how do you log a ticket? Your company will have a process in place. So usually they will have a tool that they use. In most cases, it would be a Jira tool, a tool like this, which is Jira, and you will be using this tool in the project that it will be doing a little bit later. So you're going to be okay, and you're going to be creating a ticket here. You guys remember you created a ticket, bug ticket in Microsoft Word. So you'll be doing similar thing. Instead of Word, you're going to be creating it in this, which is Jira. So here you see they have created a ticket. So all you're going to be doing, you're going to be copying this ticket. You're going to be saying, hey, I have logged a ticket. Your build is failing smoke test. Please go ahead and fix it. So that is the standard process. But if you're working in a company and they don't care about you creating a ticket, they just want you to let them know. All you're going to be doing, just sending a message here, or if they're using Slack, if they're using Microsoft Teams like you're using in the class, you're going to be doing the same thing, sending a message, hey, I was performing smoke test and this application is failing smoke test. And you would be sending screenshots. Screenshots are very, very popular in software testing or software development. Screenshot, like you can see here, right? Screenshot will tell many stories. It can explain what is the issue and whatnot. And you're gonna send a ticket like this, like she's saying, hello team, do you know what happening with this LC device? Yeah, she's also facing some issue. So it's just a communication, nothing more than that. And it could even be in email form. Some cases they would, depending on your company, they may just use emails, which is rare now. Is right now everybody's using either Slack or Teams, either or. Cool.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So after smoke test, then we have regression, ad hoc, end to end. Sanity. Okay. So let's target this one later. Let's go to GUI. And let's go to GUI then. So regression is very, very important. We'll talk about it in a second. All right, so smoke test and then GUI. GUI is graphical user interface. So this is basically look and feel of that application. So this is UI, right? UI is user interface. This is where as a user, you're interacting. You're coming in to this application, right? And you're interacting with this application and you're seeing look and feel of that application to see how does it look, how does it feel, are there any issues visible or images or layout, things like this, navigation wise. This is very simple testing when it comes to GUI. It's very easy and straightforward because it's just look and feel of that application. By looking at this application, does anything look odd? Does the picture, all these pictures and images and everything, and the wording, spelling, things like this, you are going to perform to make sure that is correct. So that's your GUI, graphical user interface testing. Pretty straightforward. Just going through that application, making sure there is no misspells or corrupted images and things like this. This one is easy and straightforward. Next one is ad hoc testing. Ad hoc testing. Let's talk about it later. That's has to make sense before we talk about it. So end-to-end, this is very, very important. End-to-end testing, right? So notice we are under functional testing. We are performing different type of functional testing. And what is functional testing? Anyone has any idea what is functional testing? We talked about non-functional testing, but I forgot to explain functional testing. Anyone has any idea? It's pretty logical.
Is it with how the like how it works and how it's being used?
Right, the functionality of that application, basically. Functional testing is nothing but functionality of that application. If you look at an application, like what do you see? Bunch of functionality. We have a home page, and home page has multiple functionality. If you go down this list, we have join now button. We have probably other functionalities. We have some text and so on. These are nothing but functionality. Now, if you look at the other pages, similar thing, right? If you click on login page, what is it? This has its own functionality. It has input box. In this input box, you have username, password field, and then you have this check mark, and then you have login button, and forgot your password. These are all functionality, right? Click here. These are functionality. So this is functionality of that application. And if you go through different pages of it, you're going to see the same thing. It has functionality, and we need to test those functionality of that application. And as a functional tester, you and I are functional tester. We are performing testing on that functionality to ensure that is working fine in terms of functionality. So smoke is done, GUI is done, then end-to-end testing. This one is so important, end-to-end testing. What is end-to-end testing? Performing testing on an application from very beginning to ending, from A to Z, end to end, basically. So how do you do that, right? You start testing from here, then you go to each and every functionality of that application. You leave nothing behind. You start from beginning and then you go to end. Now, do you do everything at once? Of course not. Functional end-to-end testing takes time. You perform this testing in a sequence, or it pretty much like takes time to perform end-to-end testing because it's a huge testing. You leave nothing behind. You test from A to Z. The other part of end-to-end testing, let's see if we have an example. Like you perform something to see outcome. For example, if you talk about a healthcare application, those of you are familiar with healthcare application, you have like eligibility and like when you send an application with certain details to see an outcome. For example, if you're applying for a healthcare benefit or insurance, right? Now you need to go to their portal and you need to fill out your application, your personal details, your job details, your earning details, your size of your household, and things like this. Based of your criteria, they will select or recommend a plan for you, and things like this. So this is, and to see that, you have to enter those details to see the output of it. So as a tester, you need to perform those testing. So you enter something to see the output. Now there are different criteria, there are different scenarios to see different output. So these are also part of end-to-end testing. And let's see if we have an example here. Let's say if we have input box, where if somebody enters some information and it sends an email. Yeah, we have it here. So now, so when you're performing functional testing, as part of end-to-end testing, right? So if you have questions, you enter your details, phone number, email address, and your message. When you enter this message, you hit submit, what happens? It goes somewhere, right? Once you hit submit, you don't see it anymore. It goes somewhere. So that's an output, right? You did something, you perform an action to see an output. Now you have to, as a tester, you need to go there, wherever it goes, to see the messages you send. How does it appear there? Is it expected? Is it what it's supposed to do? Things like this. That's also part of your end-to-end testing. What else?
So Qadir bhai, question.
Yeah.
So since end-to-end testing is the complete testing from beginning to end, so all the testing like GUI testing and the other testing we talked about, so they will fall into that end-to-end testing, smoke testing and GUI testing.
A lot of it may fall into it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't perform the other testing as because you're performing end-to-end testing, because other testing is serving different purpose. So GUI testing is user interface, and as part of end-to-end testing, you may not care about how does the application look or feel. Your focus on the output, the outcome of that scenarios that you have performed, right? The example I have given you here, you're performing certain action to see the output. Now you really don't care how the UI looks here, right? You're more focused on what am I entering and what am I seeing, right? So real end-to-end is a lot more complex than what we can explain here. If you don't have a real application, you won't be able to see what is an actual end-to-end testing or scenario. A lot of the people that are working in the industry, they still do not have clarity or never came across a real application that requires real end-to-end testing. But also, that's a good question. What you ask, a lot of the testing falls under end-to-end testing only, because you are saying A to Z, end-to-end, beginning to ending. Yes, but you're also targeting certain things, like certain output, certain scenarios, things like this. Like I mentioned about healthcare application. If you're familiar with healthcare application, if you need to go to, let's say New York State, Obamacare or whatever the insurance we have, right? You want a certain package. Now, when it comes to testing, that's a headache, because you have so many different criteria, so many different type of household or income or scenarios, right? Now, when you're performing those testing, when you're performing those testing, now you are looking at these are my end-to-end scenarios. Like, I'm going to perform this specific scenario to see this result, this output. right? So these are pretty critical depending on that application. Chances are most of the applications are pretty straightforward when you're performing end-to-end testing. Like take this application, for example, there's not much when it comes to end-to-end, right? It's not much. Like in terms of functional testing, you're going to validate the homepage, about us, our team, register. Okay, this is also another area, right? Register page. Now, when you register for this course, where does it go and what happens, right? Because it's going to go somewhere else, right? And that application is not presentable here. When you hit submit here, right? What happens? You don't see it, right? You don't see it here. Now, where does it go? That's your also end-to-end scenario. So just understand what we're talking about when it comes to end-to-end, but there are a lot more to end-to-end testing than what we can give you example here, because those application, most of the application does not have those end-to-end scenario. I can
Alright.
give you some example of my application, but it may go over your head. You may not understand. Maybe someday I will show you a little bit about what I mean.
Or we can say that if we are checking one function of the application, like we just tested the registered now, so we will test that function from beginning to end. That what it mean probably?
Yeah. Also, as an application as a whole, you need to perform testing from beginning to end, and to ensure that application is serving the purpose,
Right.
basically.
Okay. So
But
one more thing,
yeah,
like we just
go ahead.
you might have talked about it, I might have missed. Um, so we said like if we fail the smoke test, then we write back, or we generate the ticket, or we can communicate through the communication channel, either the team or the other Slack. So who do we send it to?
So when you work in a project, you will meet your team, you will understand who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
So as a tester, your main interaction is going to be with the developers. Developers will be doing the actual job, and you will be verifying their job, basically. And within this channel, you will have all the developers, project manager, your manager, all the QAs, Scrum Master. The entire team is there. Entire team is responsible to develop the product. They'll be there. When you
Or
send this message or the notification, it will be routing toward the person. It is going to be the developer. It's going to be routing to the person who initiated the build, basically.
thank you.
Sure, brother. Okay, so all right, so we're talking about end-to-end testing. Now, sanity testing. So this is one type of testing is disappearing from the industry. So I will talk about sanity testing with regression. Regression and sanity, they go side by side, basically. Okay, so let's go here. Fine. Now, backend testing. So backend testing is basically database testing. I'm sure you guys are familiar with backend. So every application has front end and backend. So if you look at this application, this is front end, right? And also every application has a backend, and backend is nothing but storage. Backend stores the data that is entered in this application. So if you go to like I was showing you before, right? If you go to register page or login page, let's go to register page. Now, when you register, this information is gone from here. Where does it go, right? It's not saved here in the UI. It's gone. So where does it go? It goes to backend, right? Backend is nothing but the database, actual physical database, physical server where is storing your information. Every application has their own database, but now obviously it's changing with AWS. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the serverless technology. So not long ago, every single company, they had their own database, own server. But then came serverless technology with AWS, and now what they say, okay, instead of you all creating your own servers, we're going to host it for you. We're going to create something massive that entire industry can use it. All you have to do, you're going to have to pay us a small fee, and we'll give you the amount of space you need out of our server. So that's where the industry has shifted, and things are changing. But nevertheless, right, is doing the same thing, is storing your data, and that needs to be tested. And how do you do those testing? So you go to actual database and perform those testing. So if I go here, and we're talking about backend testing. Now, how do you perform this testing? So now you can register here with the person name, person, whatever, ABC, John Doe or whatnot, right? And you enter your information, and then you hit register. And then you go find it in the database to make sure that that information you enter here, it exists there the way it's supposed to be stored. It's just not simple as storing the data. It's also has to be organized and structured the way it's meant to be. So you would go to the actual database and perform those testing, and you'll learn about how to do it in this class, right? So that's backend testing. Then we are moving on to security testing. So there are different types of security testing. There are network security testing. That is something, understand, this is very, very important. There are network security testing and application security testing. Network security, we do not perform. It's not something we are responsible for. There's different type of testers in the industry. They're independent testers in the industry. They perform network security testing, and usually those type of testing perform once a year or twice a year. Every company, they go out and hire those testers with special skills. They go to the network and ensure that that network is strong enough, it's not hackable. Hackers are not able to hack those from the network, basically. So that is performed again once a year or twice a year. I have seen that in my company and previous companies and whatnot. It's not our responsibility. But what we do like basic application level security testing. And what I mean by that, so so if you look at our application, any web-based application, now this is our login functionality, and you can test it with any application that has login functionality, right? For example, you have your personal Gmail, you have your personal bank account where you have login information. You as a tester need to make sure that this is not breakable, this is not accessible without having a proper account. So how do you do that, right? As a tester, your company defines the requirement for these two fields. Now they would define, like, username has to be a certain way, the password has to be a certain way. Now, if you do not have this information and if you're not registered, you should not be able to access this application. Now, you need to ensure that, and you're going to perform various scenarios to ensure that this is functionally working fine and not breakable. So that's something you and I need to ensure. So that's your application level security testing that we are responsible for. Fine, that's your security testing. Usability testing. So usability testing is very similar to GUI. This is done automatically. You really don't need to do additional steps to perform usability. Usability is to see how that application is built, how user-friendly that application is. Basically, there are applications that people can build and it's not user-friendly. It's not easy to navigate. It's not user-friendly. And this is one type of testing. Really, nobody cares about it nowadays because everything is pretty organized. But you know, it was something back in the day. But so basically, you would use that application, or you would have external people using that application, giving you feedback how user-friendly that application is, and things like this. Don't worry too much about this one. It's not important, but just understand. So that's usability testing. Compatibility testing, this one is very, very important. So compatibility is also known as cross-browser testing. So what is this? Basically compatibility, right? So notice this application I've launched this application on Firefox. Now, does this application work in other browsers like Chrome and Edge and Safari and whatnot? So that's a test you need to perform. How do you do that? You need to physically go to different browser and test that application to ensure that application is supported by different browsers. So that's compatibility or cross-browser testing. This one is very, very popular and very, very important, and you need to perform this testing because we're dealing with web-based application, and web-based application, who knows who's accessing web-based application from where, what device, what browsers and whatnot. Now, the question remains, like, how do you perform this testing? Is it something you perform manually? Is it something you use a tool to do? So you can do it differently. You can do it both ways, right? So there are different tools in the industry that allows you to perform cross-browser testing in one platform. There are automation tools, there are manual tools. You can use those tools to perform your cross-browser testing, or what you can do is, let's say you have 4 testers in your project, you have 4 testers. So now you can split the work. You can say, hey, you perform testing on one browser, I'll do the next, and someone else will perform in the different one, and then the 4th one will perform the testing on the 4th browser. That's a smart way of doing it, and I follow that method in most of my project. I would say, like, you know, let's not use the same browser to perform testing. We should perform testing in different browsers. So that way we can catch all of these issues in different browsers. And you'll be surprised, right? We may assume if the application works in one browser, it should automatically work in the next browser, but you would be surprised. We see so many issues. So that's compatibility or browser cross-browser testing. The other thing about cross-browser testing, each browser has different versions and things like this. So it really depends on your project, how much browser testing they want you to perform and how much they care, basically. So if you look at this, right, this is the version of the Chrome right now we're working on, which is the latest version. Now, ideally, this is what you're targeting. You're targeting that your latest Chrome version or any browser latest version is supported by your application. Now, if your application or if your project says, let's go to 2 version prior, or at least just ensure that each browser each browser's latest 3 version is supported by our application. Now you need to do that as well. And again, the tools that I mentioned that has the capability of going back a version or 2 to ensure it works fine. But really, nobody nowadays cares about previous version or whatnot. Everybody cares about the latest version. All right, it's getting late. We'll try to finish it soon. Rehost testing. I never really performed this testing. This is rehost. One environment, one computer environment to another computer environment. Ignore rehost testing. It's not important. Just understand the last 3. Let's talk about ad hoc. So ad hoc testing is something done randomly. Ad hoc testing is a random testing, and this testing does not have any test cases prepared. So you guys remember we created test cases, right? And test cases is what we follow when we perform any testing. So for most of our testing, we have written our test cases and we're following the steps and to perform our testing. But when it comes to ad hoc testing, we don't need test cases. This is random testing. We could randomly test that application. We could go to any portion of the application and randomly click through that application to ensure that is working fine. So that's ad hoc. Sanity testing. Let's understand regression testing first. So regression is huge, and if you
I
don't
have a
understand,
question, brother.
yeah.
So when you do ad hoc testing, then
Very good question. Very, very good question. Ad hoc testing. Several situation when you would be performing ad hoc testing. So let's say your application, you have tested the entire application. You have tested home, about us, our team, FAQ, and everything else. And every single functionality of your application, everything is tested and done. Now, there's a concept of signing off. Signing off meaning I have tested everything, everything looks good. Now I'm gonna say, I'm gonna sign off. And how do you sign off? You're gonna give those statements. You're gonna say, hey, we have tested this application, everything looks fine. Please consider QA sign off of this application. And you're gonna send this statement via email or Slack or some other channel. Once that is done, that's when that application is fully tested and we have confidence in the system, and that application can go live or to the next phase. Now, as a tester, you will never be satisfied. You will always think I could perform more testing. Now, I have performed ad hoc testing right before that. Before I sign off, I will just randomly go through that application, make sure no one broke anything. The application can be broken at any point. How can an application be broken at any point? Anybody can introduce something new. When I say anybody, I mean developers. Developers can introduce something new at any point. It could be a mistake or it could be planned. Now, ideally, when you are in the project, it should have been communicated and it should not have any surprises. But as a tester, before you do your final sign off, I would just go through that application one more time without any test cases. Just click here and there, ensuring that this application, I have tested, is it the same way? There is nothing new introduced, there is no issues. That's one scenario you would be performing ad hoc testing. Another scenario, right? Let's say you're working in a project and that project does not have any physical requirement written, but that application, but the existing application is accessible. And now, if you don't have requirement, what do you do? Now, if the application is accessible, you are going to go perform ad hoc testing. You're just going to go to one place to another place to understand that application and create your own document, create your test cases based on your ad hoc testing. So these are the two main situation where you'd be performing ad hoc testing. Does it make sense, brother?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, brother. Thanks for the good question. All right, getting late. Let's talk about regression test. So regression is a huge one and it's the most important one. So regression testing is to test the entire application or test the application to ensure that, okay, let's talk about regression again. So regression is performed after any modification on that application to ensure there is no issue caused by that modification. What I mean by that. So let's say this is your application and let's say this part of the application, it was built previously and it's tested, everything works fine. Now, what happens if they add a functionality to this page? Let's say in here they add some new text or logo or a function, a clickable function or something like that. Now you will test this part, right? You will test this part in isolation. On top of it, you're going to perform entire testing on this application again, regression. Entire testing, when I say, I meant regression testing. You're going to perform another round of testing to ensure that that additional feature that they have introduced here, this did not cause any other issues in the rest of that application. So that is regression basically. And this would happen like at any point, right? You know, even if this application partially built and tested, now a new bug was introduced, a new bug was found in that application or the part of that application or part of the functionality or the page. Now you're going to perform that testing or retesting of the bug. Once the bug is fixed, you're going to perform retesting. On top of it, you're going to perform another round of testing to ensure that that fix of bug did not cause issues in other side of application. So regression is a huge concept. We're going to talk a lot about regression down the road, down the line. But right now, understand regression is performed that on that application to ensure the changes made in that application did not cause additional issues to that application. So that's one situation where you'd be performing regression test. Another situation, again, just like ad hoc, right before you sign off on that application, obviously you're going to perform each and every possible testing in that application. The day you want to sign off, before you're doing that, you're going to perform regression test from beginning to ending by following the test cases that you have written for regression testing, ensuring that your regression test is done. Your regression is the very last testing. Remember, we mentioned smoke test. It was the very first testing. What is the very last testing? That would be regression. Before you signing off on that application, you're going to perform a thorough regression testing, ensuring that application is working fine. And then you'll be signing off. But again, regression is just not performed at the very end. Regression can be performed at any point whenever there is a changes done in application, and also regression is done at the end to ensure that everything is working fine. Hope that makes sense. Does it make sense, guys?
Brother, on what criteria we select the test cases or the regression suite, how many test cases we should run, who decide that, and is there any technique that we should follow, or the decision we should follow in the project?
Yeah, these are very good questions. So understanding regression would require you to understand rest of it first. And once you understand the rest of it, then regression becomes very easy to understand. So, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about regression. I'll try to answer your question the simplest way possible so that everybody can understand. So before going there, let me just talk a little bit briefly about sanity testing. So sanity testing is very similar as regression. Sanity is much smaller version of regression. Sanity is nothing but smaller version of regression. Regression is a huge concept. It's hard to perform regression testing manually. If I give you an example of this application, and if we have to perform regression testing on this application, if one person has to perform regression testing manually, it will take him multiple days. It will take him, by looking at this application, at least 2-3 days, maybe more. So regression is a huge concept. And this is a very, very light application, very small application. So think about big applications. Some cases regression takes a week to perform. Now that is not feasible. That is not sustainable. Now, so to tackle that, we came up with sanity. Sanity is a smaller version of regression. We'll be doing this. It does the same thing whenever there is a bug fixes or modification done. Instead of performing the entire regression test, you will just perform sanity testing after retesting that bug to ensure that application fixes did not cause any other issues in that application, things like this. Now comes to regression. How do you create regression test cases? So if you look at this application or any application, to test this application, you'll be writing test cases of each and every functionality. So if you look at home page, if you look at login page, let's do login page. So here, for this part of the application, by looking at it from my experience, I would say you need about 100 test cases to tackle this page. So you're looking at 100 test cases to test this tab, login tab, login page of that application, right? So now here, if it takes you 100 test cases, then you register page. This page probably lot more than the login page. And then, so let's say combine this application would require you to write 1,000 test cases. Now, is it possible to run the 1,000 test cases each time when there is a changes done? Of course not. Now, how do we handle this? Now, what do we do as part of a regression test? So each part of this application, we will create a folder. We'll create a folder for homepage and about us and our team and so on, right? Obviously. And from those, on those, like, we'd be writing maximum test cases, each and every test cases. From there, we're gonna hand pick couple of test cases. It could be, depending on this application, it could be like 5, 6, 7, 8, even more test cases from each functionality. The main test cases it would be like, okay, can I navigate to homepage? Yes. Can I click through the main functionality of the homepage? this is not a good example. Login is better example. So how do I create? So I mentioned, right, login functionality, we would need 100 test cases to test. Now, in terms of regression tests, I don't need all 100. My focus would be the happy path and the main functionality. Can I test the main functionality? So what I would be doing, I will be selecting, can I navigate to login functionality? Am I able to log into that application? Can I click on login? Can I click on this major functionality? And those are the test cases I would be selecting and separating and making a separate folder and calling it as regression. So to answer your question, regression, we select the major main test cases that we have written for as part of the functional testing. And who makes this decision? You as a tester, you make this decision. The criteria, like I mentioned, the major functionality of that portion of the application is what you select to mark it as a regression. Again, you need to spend a lot more time to understand regression, and we will be doing it physically when we jump into the project. Is it somewhat clear?
Yes, brother, thank you. But I still we need you're right, we need more time on it for
Yeah.
practical sense of it.
Absolutely. Regression is a huge concept. We need to understand, and this is interview purpose. You will be seeing a lot of questions from regression, and also whenever they're hiring someone, they would want to know how to perform regression testing and whatnot. Okay, it's been a long day, guys. Any questions? I recognize a lot of you are joining from UK, and it's very late for you guys. So before we end it, do you guys have any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So if the smoke test is failing, are we go forward or we have to stop until it's fixed?
That's it. If it fails, if smoke test fails, that's it. You just mark it as blocker, mark it as blocked, and fail it. We do not perform further testing. The definition of smoke testing is to ensure the major functionality of that application is working fine. And if it's not working fine, there is no point of moving forward.
Yeah, and we like you didn't talk about how we're gonna handle if the other testings are failing.
That's something you're going to be logging bugs. Remember, you log bug. You log bug. Remember, you already practiced it. You created test cases. You executed test cases, and when something failed, you logged a bug, right?
Okay, so that's the way we're gonna handle the other ones.
Yeah, the other ones you're just going to log bugs and assign it to appropriate person and move on to next part of the testing, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, sister. Like I said, like, this is just the beginning. You're going to be doing a lot of practices. It's going to be crystal clear to you guys once you're done with this. But
I
you
have a
have to
question.
put in the effort, basically. Yeah, sure. Brother.
I have a question, brother. About ad hoc testing. Let's say doing the ad hoc testing and obviously found a bug. Now, I'm obviously going to report it, but do I put it in test plan or do I just report it and get over from it?
So you don't need to put any bugs in test plan. Test plan is a plan how you're going to perform your testing. Were you trying to say test cases or do you mean test plan?
Oh, sorry, I meant test cases. So we do put test cases and then at the end we do say pass or not pass, don't we? So
Yeah.
let's say if we found a bug during ad hoc, do we need to edit there or do we just get it done and
No,
just
you
sort of
just log the bug, the definition of ad hoc. is not having test cases behind it. So you don't need to worry about test cases. At this point, you're just logging.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You guys are asking some good questions. I think I mentioned before, this group seems like very knowledgeable, which is very, very good. So the effort has to be there, guys. Put in the effort, then only you'll be successful. Put in the effort to get clarity, to understand more, to have confidence. All right, last week there was no homework, so this week homework would be for you guys to understand definition of this testing and also to write it. I will just assign this ones, not more than that. All of the definition is there on this document, and all of you have access to this document. So just read through it, do not copy and paste, just write the definition based of your understanding, not the bookish language, based of your understanding. Any other questions, guys? There are more testing, right? But I went over, so there are like alpha and beta testing, just look into it here. Good to know, not very important, but you know, it's there. All right, let's stop sharing. Stop recording.